Paradise. It's a distant vision on the horizon, a place we dream that one day we may go, a mirage of a place in our past that we had once been, perhaps the innocence of a lost childhood. It is also the title of Abdulrazak Gurnah's 1994 novel, many years before he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2021, and I think I picked an excellent choice for Tanzania with this book on my Read Around the World project. It was excellent. You can read it at a superficial level and not understand many of the choices or much of the structure of this book, as I did on my first read-through, while still appreciating it and finding a lot of really great stuff. And I still don't completely understand some of the choices and the structure, which I'll talk about. But after looking on YouTube at other people who have read and analyzed this book, I definitely got some insights that helped me understand more than the first time reading through. And I'm not talking about understanding the story. The story itself is understandable enough. You have a young boy, Yusuf, about 12 years old, whose father essentially has to send him into indentured servitude because he can't repay his debts. And so he is living and working basically for free to pay off his father's debts for a man who he calls uncle. And this uncle is also a merchant, a traveling merchant. And so at one point in the book, Yusuf, this boy, gets involved with a group of traveling merchants on what I can only describe as an odyssey into the interior of Tanzania. And this is the sort of heart of the book, the main adventure of the story. And then there is kind of another story at the end of the book that is a direct correlation to one of the sections of the Qur'an, which I have here just for times like these. And that was something that these other analyses and videos on YouTube helped me understand, is that the final part of this book is actually, a direct, pretty much reference and has many direct references to the story of Joseph or Yusuf from the Quran. And I believe it may also be from the Old Testament. I don't know if it's the same. I didn't actually get out my Christian Bible to see, or if it's similar to the Jewish whatever. I really don't know. I only looked it up in the Quran and found that, there are some direct correlations with that chapter. In fact, even lines taken right out of it. So that helped me understand a bit what the whole third section and final section of Paradise was all about, because I found myself at the end of the book thinking, well, why didn't this whole book just center around this sort of odyssey into the interior? That for me was the most exciting and interesting part of the book, because we met such an eclectic group of people and scenarios. You know, we go from towns to a mountain that's described, which I can only imagine is Mount Kilimanjaro, with the snow-capped mountains described, or the snow-capped peak described there. And we have sort of the savannas, and then we get to the lakes in the interior of Tanzania, and the different tribes and towns that are living out there, their interaction with the European colonial forces, specifically the Germans. And all this takes place in the years right before World War I. So it's a really fascinating book, but what I also appreciate about the ending that we don't really get in the rest of the book is the female perspective on a lot of what's going on. Without that ending part of the book, it would really just be a lot of dudes, except for the one of the shopkeeper's wives, I guess, is a pretty important character besides that. But there are two very important female characters at the end of the book that bring a whole new perspective and dimension to the book. Even if I didn't understand it at first, kind of what was the purpose of that whole part, but now I'm repeating myself. So, yeah, to talk more about the details, there are several sections to the book, and I feel like it starts very slow. So like the beginning and the end of the book are the hardest for me to really fit together around this really incredible, really engaging middle, which is that trading adventure. But yeah, the beginning of the book starts rather slow. Yusuf is brought to his uncle. Aviv, I think, is what is his name, and there's another boy that's working for his uncle, who he calls him Khalil, but Khalil keeps telling him, "Don't call him uncle. He's not your uncle," and the whole first part of the book, Yusuf's having these sort of nightmares about dogs and different nightmares, and he sees he's scared of everything. The dogs are coming close to him while he's sleeping and looking at him, and there's this other trader that visits his uncle, who kind of looks at him in kind of a predatory way. Everything about the beginning of the book is very predatory. It seems like that's the main word I kept thinking of as I was reading this beginning section, that this world seems incredibly predatory on the innocence and the what's often described as the beauty of Yusuf, or in Joseph in English, to keep recalling that. So you have this really predatory setup, and and always this threat of violence being done to Yusuf that is never acted upon, which I think very wisely. And then when he goes to a town and meets the shopkeeper and is helping out there before the trading expedition, he starts to learn a lot more about life. He gets educated in the Qur'an, and this education in the Qur'an and this culture actually is almost looked at by Yusuf as a very positive thing, that it gives him sort of a defense or a better perspective or way on life than sort of what's described by some of the characters as a savage way of life. Their words, not mine, of the African tribe natives. However, there are certain things in the book that, even though there is sort of this complexity, this savagery, to use a word, that he experiences in the interior among the different tribes, he also comes to appreciate something about their perspective and their way of life, as he there's just this whole really interesting negotiation in one part of the book between the traders, the merchants, the Arab merchants. I don't know if Arab's the right word. Well, Islamic, we'll say, merchants, and the native traders in the interior near the lake. I do apologize if I'm not using some of the right terminology here. I'm doing my best. But please correct me if you feel it's beneficial. So, and so as we get this really eclectic group, we also have characters that are like Indian from India, involved in this trading expedition at one point, I believe, and part of what's going on with this whole Odyssey too is just an experience. Once the trading expedition actually gets off the ground and Yusuf gets pulled along, there's really this not just the so-called savagery or barbarism of the peoples of the interior, but the harsh way of life, and all of this juxtaposed with a vision of paradise that Yusuf has at one point, and other references to the idea of paradise throughout the book, are juxtaposed with just the harshness of life, the mosquitoes biting at everybody, the hyenas biting a guy's face off in the middle of the night, the locals of one village refusing to bury their dead and just letting them rot. The harshness and the reality of how unparadise-like this reality we live in is constantly being juxtaposed with the idea and visions of paradise that Yusuf sees. And this is, to me, I guess, the most visually powerful thing about the novel is Yusuf's vision of the gate of fire when they come to the lakes in the interior, as kind of the border of the known universe, looking on into the interior of Africa, when they're at the, I don't know what the name of the lake is, but it's a lake in the interior. So yeah, that's a very, just an image in the book that really sticks in my mind. There's a lot going on here, and if you are really looking for a deep dive, I recommend you just type in YouTube Paradise by Abdulrazak Gurnah analysis, and you'll find some videos that do a better job than I of actually, analyzing what's going on behind all the scenes here. Although I have worked in some of it and tried to convey it. From the perspective of just the writing style and the, I think it was brilliantly written, like really just a great prose that's clear and easy to follow. It's obviously written originally in English. And I guess as kind of a final note, Abdulrazak Gurnah is kind of yet another one of these authors, even though it was from kind of the previous generation, I suppose, of when you read around the world and you're finding a book from every country and you're going through a lot of the sub-Saharan African countries, and it's not just sub-Saharan Africa, it's really a lot of the world. If your only languages are English and Spanish, like mine, you're going to find a lot of authors, or a lot of countries where your only option is an author that emigrated from their country at a young age. Abdulrazak Gurnah was definitely one of those. And what you'll find in a lot of these books is a certain distance between the author and the story that they're trying to tell. Or they end up writing books about simply the experience of being an immigrant. And while I'm not very engaged typically by this second class, the second type of novel I mentioned, or the novel where said person returns to their home country. I don't care for that too much. I like, I want to get the perspective of living life in that country and something that's happening in that country. And a lot of the time there can be a certain distance between the author and that, and you can really tell. In this case, I feel like it's pretty incredible how Abdulrazak Gurnah was at least for me, able to create this, even though he was 20 years possibly removed from living in his home country, to faithfully recreate, in my mind, this historic scenario and this perspective from this boy Yusuf, and have it be completely convincing without, apparently to me, being colonized by a foreign perspective, or the perspective of someone who is now virtually alienated from the culture that they're trying to represent or write about from a character. I don't know if I said that the best, but I feel it's an important thing that was going on in my mind during and after I read this book, and something that you're not going to be able to avoid thinking about if you're reading a lot of literature from around the world, and noticing that many of these authors are only getting published that the only authors from a lot of countries that are getting published are ones that have emigrated, and not necessarily having strong ties to the original country. But it's kind of a digression, but I thought that was an interesting thing to talk about. And yeah, but Abdulrazak Gurnah's Paradise was just fantastic in nearly every way, and absolutely would consider it as one of the best of the region that I have read, of just looking at all the countries I've read so far. And I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to say, but that should do it. That should do it for today. Abdulrazak Gurnah's Paradise. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World.